Billionaire CEO's wife denied intimacy for 2 years. They adopted, but a secret about their child revealed a bone-chilling truth. How long have you been lying to me, Julian? Nora's voice trembled as she held up the DNA test results, the paper shaking in her hand. Did you think I would never find out? Julian Mercer stood frozen in their Viennese apartment, his usual composer's confidence shattered. The color drained from his face as he stared at the document in his wife's hand. Nora, I can explain. Explain. She laughed, a hollow sound devoid of harmony. Explain how our young protégé is actually your biological daughter. Explain how you orchestrated this whole mentorship. How for 2 years you couldn't bear to touch me because you were planning this. Please, it's not what you think. Then tell me what it is. Tell me why the child who plays in our music room 3 times a week shares your DNA when we supposedly discovered her at an international competition in Taipei. She hadn't been touched by her husband for 2 years. Their mentorship of a young musical prodigy was celebrated throughout Vienna, but Nora was shattered when she discovered the heart-stopping truth. Have you ever discovered that the person you trusted most has been living a double life? What would you do if you learned that the musical legacy you thought you were building was founded on lies so deep they changed everything? Would you walk away, or would you fight to understand the truth behind the betrayal? If you believe that some secrets can break even the strongest bonds, hit that subscribe button and join me for a story that will challenge everything you thought you knew about love, loyalty, and the true meaning of family. Nora Blackwell had always believed in the authenticity of music. As a renowned concert pianist, she dedicated her life to ensuring that forgotten compositions found their voice, that overlooked pieces were brought into the light. Her colleagues admired her meticulous interpretation, her almost uncanny ability to spot nuances in manuscripts or performance techniques. You have the ears of a detective and the soul of a poet, her mentor had once told her. You hear beyond what's presented to what's being hidden. How ironic then that she had missed the deception unfolding in her own home for over 2 years. The concert halls and practice rooms of Vienna had become more familiar than her own bedroom, a space she once shared intimately with her husband but had grown cold and distant like instruments separated by silence. The autumn morning that would change everything began like any other. Nora stood in their kitchen, coffee in hand, watching golden leaves drift from the linden trees in the Stadtpark visible from their window. Their elegant apartment in Vienna's first district had been their wedding gift to themselves 5 years earlier, a dream home filled with music, with tall windows and perfect acoustics, a place where they had planned their future between sheet music and recording sessions. I'm heading out, Julian announced, appearing in the doorway with his leather portfolio slung over his shoulder. At 38, Julian Mercer cut an impressive figure, tall and lean, with olive skin, dark hair peppered with distinguished silver at the temples. His work as a music producer kept him traveling frequently, his schedule increasingly unpredictable over the past 2 years. Will you be home for May's lesson? Nora asked, the question a formality rather than a real expectation. I should be. The recording session shouldn't run past 4. He hesitated, then stepped closer, planting a quick kiss on her cheek, affectionate but chaste, like one might kiss a relative. Don't forget we have the conservatory meeting tomorrow. 9 a.m. sharp. Nora nodded, her stomach tightening with equal parts excitement and apprehension. After her hand injury 3 years ago had ended her performance career, they had turned their apartment into an unofficial music academy, with Julian producing and Nora teaching. Mei Lin was their star pupil, a 12-year-old violin prodigy from Taiwan whom they had discovered at a youth competition 2 years earlier. Surprisingly, it had been Julian who had been most insistent on bringing her to Vienna. There's something special about her playing, Nora, he had said one night, playing a recording of the child's performance. She needs proper mentoring, not just competition training. The process of arranging for May to study in Vienna had been grueling, visa applications, conservatory sponsorships, arrangements with her guardian in Taiwan. Throughout it all, Julian had been surprisingly dedicated, taking time off work to attend every meeting, making calls to expedite the process. His insistence on bringing her specifically from Taiwan had struck Nora as unusual at first, but he had explained it away with talk of untapped talent pools and the unique expressive quality in May's playing. "I've already prepared the guest room for May's weekend stay," Nora said, using their young protégé's name. In just 3 days, May would be staying with them for an intensive weekend workshop before an important recital. "Do you think the new sheets will be comfortable enough? We could still buy something nicer." "They're perfect," Julian interrupted, a softness in his eyes that Nora hadn't seen in years. "She'll love them." As the front door closed behind him, Nora stood alone in their kitchen, trying to ignore the cold space between them that had nothing to do with physical distance. There had been a time when Julian couldn't keep his hands off her, when they made love after concerts, the adrenaline of performance flowing between them like electricity. Now she couldn't remember the last time he had touched her with desire. 2 years of separate sides of the bed, of polite excuses and early mornings at the studio. At first, she had worried it was medical, stress, hormones, the pressure of rebuilding her career after her injury. Then came darker suspicions. Was there someone else? But her discreet inquiries had yielded nothing concrete. No suspicious texts, no unexplained charges, no lipstick on collars or late-night calls, just a gradual cooling, a pulling away that coincided with her third-hand surgery and their decision to focus on teaching rather than her performance career. "You need to confront him," Dr. Rosa Jimenez had told her over lunch last week. Rosa had been Nora's best friend since conservatory days, her directness as a music therapist a perfect counterbalance to Nora's tendency to seek harmony and understanding before confrontation. "Either he tells you what's going on or you need to decide if this is the marriage you want. We're about to host May for a crucial weekend before her recital," Nora had replied, pushing her salad around her plate. "I can't throw everything into chaos now." "And after?" Rosa had raised an eyebrow. "When there's a young musician involved, it gets harder, not easier." Nora had changed the subject then, unwilling to voice her secret hope that their shared passion for mentoring May might rekindle what they had lost, that Julian might find his way back to her through their musical connection to the child. Now, as she prepared for a day of teaching, Nora allowed herself to imagine their future as musical mentors. May's photograph showed a solemn little girl with dark eyes and intelligent features. Something in those eyes had called to Nora immediately, a watchfulness, a depth that seemed beyond her 12 years. "She needs stability," the conservatory director had said. "A musical home where she can truly develop." Nora was determined to give her that, even if her own foundation felt increasingly unstable. The Vienna Conservatory buzzed with the familiar energy of a new term beginning. Nora spent the morning coaching a chamber ensemble, her ears catching every nuance, every misplaced note or rushed phrase. Professor Blackwell, "Where would you like the quartet to set up for the master class?" called her assistant Pascal, a promising graduate student with wire-rimmed glasses and an encyclopedic knowledge of Romantic-era compositions. "In the East Hall with the Bosendorfer to the left," Nora replied, checking her schedule. "Make sure the acoustics are tested before the students arrive." As she worked, Nora found her thoughts drifting repeatedly to Julian and their young protégé. When had things changed between them? She could pinpoint when the physical intimacy had stopped, around the time they had discovered May at that competition in Taipei. But the emotional distance had crept in more gradually, like water seeping through invisible cracks in a foundation. Her phone buzzed with a text from Julian, "Meeting running late. Don't wait up. So much for being home by 4. Nora sent a brief acknowledgement and slipped the phone back into her pocket, ignoring the familiar disappointment. "Everything okay?" Pascal asked, noticing her expression. "Fine, just a change of plans for the evening." Nora forced a smile. "Actually, I think I'll stay late and finish reviewing the competition applications. No reason to rush home." Hours later, surrounded by student portfolios and performance recordings, Nora realized she had lost track of time. The conservatory had closed to the public, leaving only security guards and a few dedicated faculty members working late. Her phone showed 3 missed calls from Julian, unusual enough that she felt a flicker of concern. She called him back immediately. "Nora, where are you?" His voice sounded tense, almost panicked. At the conservatory. I told you I was working late. No, you didn't. I've been worried sick. Nora frowned, certain she had texted him. I'm sorry if my message didn't go through. Is everything okay? I need you to come home now. There was something in his voice she couldn't identify, urgency, but also something else. Fear. Julian, what's going on? Just come home, please. The drive back to their apartment took 20 minutes, each one filled with speculation. Had there been an accident? A family emergency? Was this finally the moment when whatever secret he'd been keeping would come to light? Their apartment was fully lit when she arrived, Julian's car in the private garage alongside an unfamiliar black sedan. Nora approached cautiously, her musician's training making her listen before entering. Voices from inside. More than just Julian's. She used her key, stepping into their entryway to find Julian in intense conversation with a man she'd never seen before. Both men turned at her entrance, conversation halting abruptly. Nora, Julian said, relief evident in his voice. This is Thomas Keller. He works with me. Thomas Keller was a contrast to Julian's polished appearance, shorter, stockier, with the weathered look of someone who spent significant time outdoors despite his professional attire. His handshake was firm, his accent difficult to place. Mrs. Mercer, he said, studying her with open curiosity. I've heard much about you. Strange. I've heard nothing about you, Nora replied, looking between the men. What's going on? Studio emergency, Julian said quickly. International artist with significant contractual issues. Thomas needed some documents I keep here. It was a plausible explanation, but something felt off. Julian's home office was upstairs, yet they had been standing in the living room, and neither held any documents or recording equipment. At 9 p.m., she asked. Music never sleeps, Thomas said with a tight smile. I should be going. We'll continue this tomorrow, Julian. I'll walk you out, Julian said, following Thomas to the door. Nora caught fragments of their hushed conversation, not ready. Timing is critical. Reconsider the approach. Before the front door closed and Julian returned, his expression carefully composed. I'm sorry about the cryptic call, he said. Thomas showed up unexpectedly with an urgent contract issue. What kind of contract issue requires him to come to our home at night? The confidential kind. Julian's tone held a note of finality. She recognized his way of shutting down conversations he didn't want to have. How was your day at the conservatory? The deflection was so transparent that Nora almost laughed. Enlightening. I spent hours authenticating student audition recordings, making sure nothing was misrepresented or falsely credited. If Julian caught her pointed tone, he didn't show it. I'm going to make some tea. Would you like some? No, I think I'll go to bed early. Big day tomorrow with the conservatory meeting. Julian nodded, a strange expression crossing his face. Yes, big day. Have you ever felt that the person closest to you was living a double life? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video if you've ever experienced that gut feeling that something just isn't right in a relationship. That night, lying in bed with Julian asleep beside her, careful inches separating their bodies, Nora stared at the ceiling and tried to make sense of the evening's strange encounter. In her work, inconsistencies were red flags, signals that a performance required closer examination. The inconsistencies in her marriage had been piling up for months, Julian's emotional distance, his sudden passion for mentoring Mei Lin, his mysterious calls in languages she didn't speak. And now this strange visitor asking about timing and approaches. Tomorrow they would finalize the arrangements for Mei's special recital. A performance that could launch the girl's international career. Whatever was happening, Nora needed answers before they became even more deeply involved in the child's musical future. Morning came with Viennese drizzle, the kind that didn't require umbrellas but left everything slightly damp. Nora dressed carefully for their meeting, a burgundy wrap dress that suggested professional authority without trying too hard, pearl earrings that had belonged to her grandmother, subtle makeup to hide the shadows of her sleepless night. Julian too seemed to have taken unusual care with his appearance, his charcoal suit perfectly pressed, his usual 5 o'clock shadow cleanly shaven. He was quiet during breakfast, checking his phone repeatedly until Nora finally addressed it. "Are you expecting an important call?" He startled slightly. "Just checking the time. We shouldn't be late." The conservatory occupied a historic building in Vienna's Museum Quarter, its dignified exterior belying the passion and ambition cultivated within. As they waited in the ornate lobby, Nora observed the other faculty members, some nervously reviewing notes, others discussing upcoming performances, all part of the competitive world of classical music education. Mr. and Mrs. Mercer, the receptionist, appeared with a warm smile. "Director Bauer is ready for you now." Franz Bauer, the conservatory director, greeted them in his office with the practiced enthusiasm of someone who orchestrated musical careers for a living. In his 50s, with a stylish gray beard and round glasses, he had guided May's educational placement with steady competence. "Today's the day," he said, gesturing for them to sit. "After this, we're just waiting for the recital to confirm May's scholarship status." The next hour passed in a blur of signatures and final arrangements. Nora answered questions about their mentorship approach, their support for May's technical development, their plans for helping her adjust to Viennese musical traditions while honoring her Taiwanese background. Julian contributed where appropriate, his responses rehearsed but convincing. "Now, about the repertoire for Sunday," Director Bauer said, consulting his notes. "May will perform the Mendelssohn Concerto First Movement, followed by the Paganini Caprice No. 24, Nora replied. "We've been working on the technical passages for months." "Actually," Julian interjected, "I've been helping her prepare the Sibelius as well. I think she should perform that instead." Nora turned to him in surprise. "You have? When?" "During our extra sessions while you were teaching your Thursday masterclass. I wanted it to be a surprise, something special to showcase her emotional range." Director Bauer beamed. "That's wonderful dedication, Mr. Mercer. The Sibelius will certainly make a stronger impression on the scholarship committee." Nora nodded agreement, but internally, questions multiplied. Julian had never mentioned these extra sessions. She had never seen him working separately with May. What else was he doing during those times when he claimed to be helping their young protégé? As they completed the final paperwork, Director Bauer slid a folder across his desk. "These just came in from Taipei. Updated recordings of May from last week. I thought you'd like to see how she's practicing at home." Nora opened the folder eagerly. Inside were several printed photographs along with a USB drive. The photos showed May in what appeared to be a practice room, her violin positioned perfectly, her expression one of intense concentration. In each image, those solemn dark eyes seemed to look directly into the camera, assessing, watchful. "She's remarkable," Nora whispered, passing the photos to Julian. His reaction was subtle but unmistakable. A sharp intake of breath, his fingers tightening on the photographs, his eyes lingering on each image with an intensity that seemed beyond normal mentorship. When he looked up, his eyes were bright with what might have been tears. "She is," he agreed, his voice rough with emotion. On the drive home, Nora studied her husband's profile as he navigated through traffic, trying to reconcile the man beside her with the increasingly mysterious figure he had become. The tenderness he had shown toward May's photographs was the most genuine emotion she had seen from him in months, not the detached consideration of a mentor, but something deeper, more visceral. "You never told me you were teaching May the Sibelius," she said finally, breaking the comfortable silence. "Like I said, I wanted to surprise you." His eyes remained on the road. "I know how much you've been investing in her development. I wanted to do my part." "What else haven't you told me, Julian?" The question hung between them, loaded with unspoken accusations. Julian's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "What do you mean?" "I mean that we barely talk anymore. We definitely don't touch. You're keeping secrets about your work, about your teaching, about this mysterious colleague who shows up at our house at night. Nora, no. Let me finish. We're about to host a young musician who's already experienced significant disruption in her life. I need to know that we're solid, that whatever's been happening between us for the past 2 years isn't going to continue. Julian pulled the car over, parking alongside a small park. For a long moment, he stared through the windshield at the empty playground swaying in the light breeze. I love you, he said finally, turning to face her. That hasn't changed. But everything else has, Julian, Nora replied softly. You don't touch me. You don't share your thoughts. You're physically present but emotionally somewhere else entirely. I know. He closed his eyes briefly. I've been working through some things. Personal things. For 2 years. Without talking to me about it. That's not a marriage, Julian. That's 2 people sharing an apartment. After your injury, I didn't know how to, and then it became a pattern. And the longer it went on. So this is about the fact that I can't perform anymore. That my career changed. The old pain surfaced, sharp and familiar. No. Julian reached for her hand, the first time he had initiated physical contact in weeks. No, Nora. This was never about your playing. If anyone failed, it was me. How? How did you fail? He withdrew his hand, turning back to stare at the park. By not being honest. By not being brave enough to face certain truths. What truths? Julian, please just tell me. For a moment, she thought he might finally open up, might offer the explanation she had been seeking for so long. But then his phone rang, the special tone he used for work emergencies, and the moment shattered. I have to take this, he said, already reaching for the phone. I'm sorry. Nora leaned back against the headrest, resignation settling over her like a familiar blanket. Whatever confession had been brewing would remain unspoken, at least for now. Julian's conversation was brief, conducted in what sounded like Mandarin, a language he rarely used except for international artists. When he hung up, his expression had shifted from vulnerable to focused. I need to go to the studio, he said, starting the car again. International situation. Of course, Nora replied, too tired to argue. When will you be home? I'm not sure. Don't wait up. By the time they reached the apartment, Julian's walls were fully reconstructed, his manner brisk and professional as he gathered his portfolio and laptop. Nora watched from the doorway as he prepared to leave, wondering if the man she had married still existed somewhere beneath this careful facade. Julian, she called as he headed for the door. May arrives tomorrow afternoon. Whatever is going on, whatever you're not telling me, we need to resolve it before she comes. He paused, hand on the doorknob. I know. We will. I promise. Then he was gone, leaving Nora alone in their perfectly appointed apartment, surrounded by the musical life they had built together, but feeling more isolated than ever. That evening, restless and unable to focus on the sheet music before her, Nora decided to do something she had avoided for months, enter Julian's home office. The room was technically shared space, but it had become increasingly his domain as his work grew more international. He never explicitly forbade her entry, but his careful closing of the door and hushed phone conversations created an implicit boundary. The office was meticulously organized, as was Julian's way. His desk held a high-end laptop, currently absent with him, a framed photo from their wedding day, and a small carved wooden box he had brought back from a business trip to Taiwan. A local craftsman's work, he had said, though he rarely elaborated on his trips abroad. Nora ran her fingers over the polished surface of the desk, feeling like an intruder in her own home. What was she even looking for? Evidence of an affair? Financial troubles? Some explanation for the growing distance between them? The desk drawers revealed nothing unusual: office supplies, passport and travel documents, receipts neatly filed. The bookshelf held technical manuals on recording equipment, some music theory texts they both enjoyed, and several books on pedagogy and youth development, recent editions that she recognized as research for May's mentorship. She was about to leave, feeling foolish for her amateur detective work, when she noticed something odd about the carved box. Unlike the rest of the office, it had a fine layer of dust except for fingerprints around the edges, suggesting recent handling. Nora hesitated only briefly before lifting the lid. Inside, she expected to find cufflinks or perhaps old concert programs. Instead, she discovered a small stack of letters written in Chinese characters, a worn leather journal, and beneath them, a velvet pouch. The journal was written in a language she couldn't read, not the Mandarin phrases Julian occasionally used with international artists, but something more personal. The letters appeared to be correspondence dated over the past 3 years, all bearing the same return address in Taipei, Taiwan. With trembling fingers, Nora opened the velvet pouch and tipped its contents into her palm. A delicate silver pendant on a thin chain. The pendant was old, the silver tarnished in places, with an intricate design etched on its surface. When she pressed the tiny clasp, it opened to reveal a miniature photograph, a dark-haired woman holding a violin, her smile radiant despite the photo's faded quality. The woman was a stranger to Nora, but something about her features, the shape of her eyes, the curve of her jaw, triggered a sense of familiarity that she couldn't immediately place. The sound of the front door opening sent Nora into panicked motion. She quickly returned everything to the box, careful to position it exactly as she had found it, and was stepping out of the office just as Julian reached the top of the stairs. "You're home early," she said, hoping her voice sounded normal. Julian looked between her and the office door, his expression unreadable. The situation resolved more quickly than expected. "Were you looking for something?" "Just some sheet music," Nora improvised. "I thought you might have the Sibelius score since you've been working on it with May." He studied her for a moment longer, then nodded. "It's in the music room now, on the top shelf by the violin stand. I moved it there this morning." "Right. Thanks." Nora moved past him toward the stairs, intensely aware of his eyes following her. "I think I'll head to bed early. It's been a long day." Sometimes the most devastating revelations come from unexpected sources. If you've ever had your world turned upside down by a stranger with hidden information, hit the like button and keep watching to see what happens next in this twisted tale of deception and unexpected connections. Later, lying awake in the darkness, Nora's mind raced with questions. Who was the woman in the pendant? Why was Julian corresponding with someone in Taiwan, the same country where they had discovered May? And why keep it hidden? The explanation that seemed most obvious was also the most painful. Julian had been involved with someone else, perhaps this woman in Taiwan. But why the secrecy now? Why the elaborate mentorship of May? And why choose that specific young violinist from that specific country? Sleep eluded her even after Julian joined her in bed, maintaining the careful distance that had become their norm. She listened to his breathing, wondering if he too was awake, wondering what secrets he carried into their shared darkness. The next morning brought gray skies and steady rain, matching Nora's somber mood. She left early for the conservatory, avoiding the awkward breakfast conversation that had become their routine. The discovery in Julian's office had only deepened her confusion, adding new questions without answering any existing ones. At the conservatory, she threw herself into work, finding comfort in the methodical tasks of teaching and evaluation. Here, at least, musical truths could be verified, interpretations confirmed through technique and historical understanding. "Professor Blackwell?" Pascal appeared at her office door, hovering uncertainly. "There's someone here to see you. He says it's personal." Nora looked up from the score she was annotating. "Who is it?" "He wouldn't give his name. Just said you'd want to speak with him about your husband's work in Taiwan." Nora's heart skipped a beat. "Where is he now?" "Waiting in the small rehearsal room." "I can tell him you're busy if you prefer." "No, that's fine. I'll see him." Nora removed her reading glasses and smoothed her hair, mind racing. Who would come to her workplace to discuss Julian's connection to Taiwan? The man waiting in the rehearsal room was immediately familiar, Thomas Keller, Julian's mysterious colleague from 2 nights ago. He stood as she entered, his weathered face grave. "Mrs. Mercer," he said by way of greeting. "Thank you for seeing me, Mr. Keller. This is unexpected. I apologize for the intrusion at your workplace, but I needed to speak with you privately, away from your husband." Nora gestured for him to sit, taking the chair opposite. "That sounds ominous." "Not ominous. Necessary." Thomas leaned forward, his expression earnest. "How much has Julian told you about his work? His real work?" "He's a music producer. He helps international artists develop and record their work." Thomas nodded slowly. "That's his cover?" "Yes. His official job description." "Cover?" Nora's mouth went dry. "What are you talking about? Your husband doesn't just produce music, Mrs. Mercer. He works for a specialized division of international arts protection. His musical expertise and language skills make him particularly valuable for operations in Asia and Eastern Europe." Nora stared at him, trying to process this information. "You're saying my husband is what? A spy?" "An investigative agent," Thomas corrected, "with a focus on tracking art crimes and cultural theft across international boundaries. Forgery and exploitation, primarily." "This is absurd." Nora stood, gathering her composure. "If you'll excuse me." "Ask him about Vivian Chen," Thomas interrupted. "Ask him about Operation Crescendo and Taipei. Ask him why Franz Bauer has been on Heinrich Vogel's payroll for 15 years despite claiming to run an independent conservatory." Nora sank back into her chair, the names landing like stones in still water. "How do you know about our mentorship of Mei Lin?" "Because it isn't just mentorship, Mrs. Mercer. At least not in the traditional sense." "What are you talking about?" "We've gone through all the proper channels, all the legal requirements. On paper, yes. But the child you're bringing into your home this weekend isn't a random prodigy who needs musical guidance. She's Julian's daughter, his biological daughter from a relationship he had during a long-term assignment in Taipei before he met you." The world seemed to tilt beneath Nora, the rehearsal room spinning around her. "That's not possible. Julian and I met 7 years ago. May is 12. Yes. Do the math, Mrs. Mercer." "No." Nora shook her head firmly. "No. This is crazy. If Julian had a child, he would have told me." "Would he? If acknowledging her meant revealing his true profession? If it meant admitting he'd been living under a partial cover identity even with his wife?" Nora's musician's mind, trained to analyze and interpret, began making connections despite her emotional resistance. The sudden cooling in their physical relationship approximately 2 years ago. Julian's surprising dedication to May's mentorship. His insistence on working with this specific Taiwanese violinist. His unexplained language skills. The woman in the pendant. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why now?" Thomas's expression softened slightly. "Because Julian is planning something dangerous. The mentorship isn't just about reuniting with his daughter. It's cover for an operation targeting Heinrich Vogel, a major figure in international music forgery with ties to several conservatories, including the one where May studied in Taipei." "I don't believe you." But even as she said it, Nora knew it was a lie. The evidence was aligning too perfectly, filling in the gaps of the past 2 years with terrible clarity. "You don't have to take my word for it." Thomas slid a small card across the table. "My contact information. When you're ready to hear the rest, call me." He stood to leave, pausing at the door. "One more thing, Mrs. Mercer. The girl's mother, Vivian Chen. She died under suspicious circumstances 2 years ago. That's when May's career suddenly accelerated. That's when Julian started planning this retrieval. After Thomas left, Nora sat motionless in the rehearsal room, his card clutched in her hand. The world she had known, her marriage, her musical mentorship, her understanding of the man she had shared her life with, was crumbling around her, replaced by a reality she couldn't begin to comprehend. If Thomas was telling the truth, then everything about the past 2 years had been orchestrated by Julian, the discovery of May, their mentorship, their plans for her musical future. If he was lying, but to what end would a stranger fabricate such an elaborate story? There was one way to confirm or disprove Thomas's claims. With shaking hands, Nora reached for her phone and called the conservatory's administrative office. "Pascal? I need a favor. A personal one, completely off the record." "Of course, Professor Blackwell. Anything. I need you to help me arrange a DNA test." Discreetly. That evening, Nora returned home with a simple testing kit hidden in her purse and a weight of dread pressing on her chest. The apartment was quiet when she entered, no sign of Julian. A note on the kitchen counter informed her that he had gone to meet with the accompanist they had hired for May's recital. Another piece of their carefully constructed plan that now seemed suspect. Nora moved through the apartment with new awareness, seeing it not as the home they had built together but as an elaborate set for a performance she hadn't known she was part of. How much of their life together had been real? Their courtship, their wedding, her struggle to redefine her career after her injury, had any of it been genuine? She made her way to Julian's office, no longer hesitant about invading his privacy. The carved box was where she had left it, seemingly untouched. This time, she removed everything, the letters, the journal, the pendant, and brought them to the living room for closer examination. Though she couldn't read the Chinese characters, the dates were recognizable, and several of the letters included photographs. In them, she saw the same woman from the pendant, beautiful with long dark hair and expressive eyes, at various stages with a violin, and then with a young child who grew into a girl in the progression of images. The final photograph showed the woman standing beside a small girl about 10 years old. The child's features were hauntingly familiar, the same solemn dark eyes that had looked out from May's conservatory files. But Nora now recognized the other resemblance that had nagged at her. The child had Julian's distinctive hands, his serious expression, his way of holding the violin with subtle confidence. The DNA test suddenly seemed unnecessary. But Nora was a musician at heart. She needed irrefutable proof, not just circumstantial evidence and emotional certainty. She was still sitting among the scattered evidence when the front door opened and Julian called her name. Nora made no move to hide what she had discovered, watching silently as he entered the living room and froze at the sight of his secret spread before her. "Nora," he said, her name a plea and a question. "What are you doing?" "Learning the truth," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "Something you should have told me years ago." Julian's gaze moved from her face to the photographs, the letters, the pendant now hanging from her fingers. "How did you find these?" "That's your question?" "Not, I'm sorry for lying to you for our entire marriage." "Not, let me explain why I've been orchestrating this elaborate mentorship of my biological child." He paled visibly, sinking into the chair across from her. "Who told you? Does it matter? It's true, isn't it? Mei Lin is your daughter. Your biological daughter with this woman." Nora held up one of the photographs. "Vivian Chen." Julian closed his eyes briefly, defeat written in every line of his body. "Yes." That single word confirmation hit Nora like a physical blow, driving the air from her lungs. Despite all the evidence, despite her growing certainty, some part of her had still hoped for another explanation, some misunderstanding that would restore the foundation of their life together. "How could you?" she whispered, tears finally breaking through her shock. "How could you lie to me about something so fundamental? We've been mentoring young musicians for years, Julian. Years of building our teaching studio and nurturing talent. And all that time, you had a daughter you never told me about. It wasn't that simple. Then explain it to me. Make me understand what could possibly justify this level of deception." Julian ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration she had seen countless times but now seemed to belong to a stranger. I couldn't tell you about May without telling you about my work. And I couldn't tell you about my work without putting you at risk. Your work as an investigative agent tracking art crimes. At his surprised look, she added, yes, I know about that too. Quite the day for revelations. Who have you been talking to? Thomas Keller came to see me at the conservatory. Julian swore under his breath. Keller had no right to approach you. This compromises everything. Everything except our marriage, which you've already thoroughly compromised on your own. Nora stood, unable to remain still with the emotions churning through her. I want the whole truth, Julian. Right now. About your work, about Vivian, about May. Everything. For a long moment, Julian sat in silence, seemingly weighing his options. Then, with a deep breath, he began to speak. My real name is Julian Mercer, that much is true. I was recruited by International Arts Protection directly out of conservatory for my musical training and language aptitude. For the past 12 years, I've been working undercover, primarily in Asia, tracking forgery and exploitation connected to larger criminal networks. Nora listened without interrupting, trying to reconcile this new narrative with the man she thought she had known. 8 years ago, I was on a long-term assignment in Taiwan, investigating counterfeit historical instruments being laundered through a network of supposedly legitimate music schools. I was using the cover identity of a visiting professor. That's when I met Vivian. His voice softened at the name. She was a violin instructor at one of the schools I was investigating. Brilliant performer, passionate teacher. You were involved with her while undercover. It wasn't supposed to happen. Personal entanglements are expressly forbidden during deep cover assignments. But Vivian was special, intuitive, compassionate. And as it turned out, equally committed to exposing the exploitation happening at the school where she taught. She became my unofficial informant. And your lover. Julian nodded, not meeting her eyes. For almost a year. Then my assignment ended, and I was recalled to Vienna for debriefing. Vivian and I agreed to end things. My next assignment would take me to a different country, a different cover identity. It was never meant to be permanent. But she was pregnant. I didn't know that when I left. She chose not to tell me. I didn't learn about May until 2 years later, when Vivian finally reached out through secure channels. By then, I had met you. Nora felt a cold clarity descending, the timeline aligning with terrible precision. So when we met, when we fell in love, when we married, you already knew you had a child with another woman. Yes. The admission seemed to cost him physically, his shoulders sagging. I should have told you then, but my work was classified. My relationship with Vivian had been unauthorized, and acknowledging May would have compromised multiple ongoing operations. I convinced myself it was safer for everyone if I maintained the separation. Safer for your career, you mean? For Vivian and May. The people I investigate aren't petty criminals, Nora. They're dangerous, connected, ruthless. If they had discovered my true identity, anyone connected to me would have been at risk. So you what? Sent child support? Visited occasionally between assignments? Played part-time father while building a completely separate life with me? No. Vivian refused any financial support. She was fiercely independent and didn't want to maintain connections that might put May at risk. I respected her decision. I saw photos, received updates, but I wasn't part of their lives. Then what changed? Why this elaborate scheme to mentor your own daughter now? Julian's expression darkened. 2 years ago, Vivian was killed. Concert hall accident, officially, but the circumstances were suspicious. She had been helping build a case against Heinrich Vogel, the impresario who runs the international competition circuit. We believe he discovered her cooperation with authorities. Julian's voice broke slightly. May was at a lesson when it happened. After Vivian's death, with no known relatives, she was placed in a state music academy with dormitory housing. When I learned what had happened, something in me broke, Nora. My daughter was essentially alone in an institutional setting, and I was living this comfortable life, pretending to be someone I wasn't. The guilt was unbearable. Nora thought back to the timing, approximately 2 years ago, when their physical relationship had abruptly ceased. When Julian had become emotionally distant, distracted, unavailable. That's when everything changed between us. Yes. He looked up at her, his eyes filled with regret. I couldn't bear to touch you, to be intimate, while carrying this secret. Every time we worked with a young musician, all I could think about was the child I had abandoned. I wanted to tell you, but the longer I waited, the more impossible it seemed. So instead, you orchestrated this mentorship using your agency connections to ensure we would work with May, creating this elaborate plan to bring your daughter home without ever having to admit the truth. I convinced myself it was the best solution for everyone. May would have musical guidance, a connection to her art. You would have the protégé you deserved after your performing career was cut short. And I could finally be a father to my daughter without compromising my cover or putting anyone at risk. Except it was all built on lies. Nora's voice was cold now, anger replacing shock. Our entire future as mentors, my connection to May, based on a foundation of deception. I never meant to hurt you. But you did. Systematically, repeatedly, deliberately. Nora gathered the photographs into a neat stack, her musician's instinct for order asserting itself even in chaos. And what happens now, Julian? May arrives tomorrow for her weekend stay before the recital, and then what? You finally start acting like a husband again because your conscience is clear. We pretend to be normal mentors while you continue your secret life. My assignment tracking Vogel is my last field operation. After this, I'm accepting a desk position. No more covers, no more extended absences. Just analysis and consultation. Regular hours. Home every night. He leaned forward, his expression pleading. We can be a real family, Nora. The three of us. A real family isn't built on lies of this magnitude. Nora stood, gathering her purse. I need time to think. Time away from you and all of this. Where are you going? To a hotel? To Rosa's? Somewhere I can process what you've done without watching you continue to perform the role of devoted husband. Nora, please don't. She held up a hand, stopping his approach. You've had 2 years to come clean, to trust me with the truth. You chose deception instead, over and over again. Now I get to choose what happens next. As she moved toward the door, Julian called after her, his voice desperate. What about May? She's arriving tomorrow afternoon. She's expecting both her mentors. Nora paused, the weight of an innocent child's expectations heavy on her conscience. I don't know, Julian. I honestly don't know. But unlike you, I won't make promises I can't keep. With that, she walked out, leaving behind the life she had believed in and the man she had thought she knew. Outside, rain fell steadily from a darkening sky, mirroring the tears that finally broke free as she drove away from the beautiful apartment that had housed so many beautiful lies. What would you do if you discovered your entire marriage was built on lies? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe if you want to hear more stories about the complex nature of love, trust, and betrayal. The rain had turned to a torrential downpour by the time Nora reached Dr. Rosa Jimenez's elegant townhouse in the Alsergrund district. She sat in her car for several minutes, watching rivulets trace patterns on the windshield, trying to compose herself enough to face her friend. How could she possibly explain the past 24 hours? How could anyone understand the complete unraveling of everything she had believed about her life? Finally, gathering her courage along with the overnight bag she had hastily packed, Nora made a dash for the covered porch. Rosa opened the door before she could knock, concern etched on her expressive features. Nora, what's happened? She ushered her inside, taking in her rain-soaked appearance and red-rimmed eyes. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Not a ghost," Nora replied, her voice hollow. "Just my husband. The real one, not the version I've been married to for 5 years." Rosa led her to the living room where a fire crackled in the ornate fireplace. As a music therapist, Rosa had developed a gift for patient silence, creating space for others to speak when ready. She wrapped Nora in a soft throw blanket and pressed a glass of red wine into her trembling hands, then simply waited. The story spilled out in disjointed fragments. The mysterious colleague, the hidden letters, the revelation about Julian's true profession, and finally the devastating truth about May. Throughout the telling, Rosa listened without interruption, her expression shifting from shock to anger to sympathy. "So May is Julian's biological daughter," she said when Nora finally fell silent. "And the entire mentorship was orchestrated to bring her into your home without revealing his double life." "Yes." The single word carried the weight of Nora's broken trust. "Our entire marriage has been a performance. I don't even know who he really is." "That's not entirely true," Rosa countered gently. "The man who made music with you, who supported you through 3 hand surgeries, who shared your life for 5 years, those parts weren't necessarily fake, just incomplete. Founded on fundamental lies." Nora set down her untouched wine. "How do you build a life with someone who could deceive you so completely? Who could watch you grieve the end of your performing career while hiding the existence of his own child?" "I don't know," Rosa admitted. "But I do know you need time to process this before making any decisions. You can stay here as long as you need." "Thank you." Nora's voice caught on a sob she had been suppressing. "The worst part is I still have to decide about May. She's an innocent child expecting her mentors tomorrow. A child who lost her mother and has been living in an institutional setting for 2 years. Julian's choices are not your responsibility," Rosa reminded her. "Neither is May, legally speaking. But morally, emotionally. I've spent months preparing to guide her. I've restructured my teaching schedule, researched trauma-informed music education for displaced students." Nora twisted the edge of the blanket between her fingers. "I can't just walk away because her father is a liar. No one would blame you if you did. I would blame me." Nora looked up, sudden clarity breaking through her emotional turmoil. "I need to meet her, Rosa. Whatever happens with Julian, whatever I decide about our marriage, I need to see May for myself." "Are you sure that's wise? Going to the conservatory with Julian after what you've learned?" "No. It's probably the definition of unwise. But I can't make a decision about our future, without looking her in the eyes." Rosa studied her friend's face, recognizing the determination beneath the hurt. "Then that's what you'll do. But you don't have to decide anything tonight. For now, just rest." That night, in Rosa's comfortable guest room, Nora dreamed of concert halls where all the instruments played out of tune, where no conductor could bring order to the cacophony. She woke before dawn, disoriented in the unfamiliar darkness, reaching instinctively for Julian before remembering why she was alone. Her phone showed 17 missed calls and a dozen text messages, all from Julian. She scrolled through them without reading, not yet ready to hear his explanations or apologies. Instead, she opened her laptop and began what she did best, research. If Julian was indeed an investigative agent tracking art crimes, if Vivian had been his informant and had died under suspicious circumstances, if there was a dangerous forger named Heinrich Vogel connected to the conservatory, these facts would leave traces, however faint. By the time Rosa knocked on her door with coffee 3 hours later, Nora had compiled a disturbing amount of corroborating evidence. Heinrich Vogel was indeed a wealthy Austrian impresario with ties to several conservatories, including the Music Academy where May had studied in Taiwan. 3 years ago, an international arts protection agency had seized several counterfeit Stradivarius violins traced to his network, though no charges were ever filed. And 2 years ago, a violin instructor named Vivian Chen had died in a single-car accident on a mountain road outside Taipei, an accident with no witnesses and minimal police investigation. You look like you haven't slept, Rosa observed, setting down the coffee mug. I found confirmation of parts of Julian's story, Nora replied, turning her laptop to show the articles she had found. Not the personal elements, obviously, but the framework. This man Vogel, Vivian's death, it aligns with what he told me. Does that make it better or worse? I don't know. Nora ran a hand through her tangled hair. On one hand, at least he wasn't lying about everything. On the other, it means he really has been living this whole secret life while married to me, potentially putting us both at risk without my knowledge or consent. What are you going to do? Nora closed her laptop with a decisive click. I'm going to call Thomas Keller. If Julian won't give me the whole truth, maybe his colleague will. The meeting was arranged for that afternoon at a nondescript cafe in the University District. Nora arrived early, choosing a table in the corner with clear sight lines to all entrances, a precaution that would have seemed paranoid 3 days ago but now felt necessary. Thomas arrived precisely on time, his weathered face grim as he slid into the seat across from her. Mrs. Mercer, you look like you've had a difficult night. That seems to be going around, she replied, noting the dark circles under his eyes. You don't look much better. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Occupational hazard. I assume you've spoken with Julian. Yes. He confirmed what you told me about May. About Vivian. Nora leaned forward, lowering her voice. What he didn't explain is why you came to me now. What's the operation he's planning that has you concerned? Thomas studied her for a long moment, seemingly weighing how much to reveal. Julian hasn't just arranged to mentor his daughter. He's using the mentorship as cover to get close to Heinrich Vogel. The recital on Sunday, Vogel personally attends all major conservatory events, and Julian believes he has evidence in his private office that would connect him to Vivian's death. The official investigation was shut down almost immediately. Vogel has connections throughout the European musical establishment, but Julian has been building his own case for 2 years, gathering evidence outside official channels. He's planning to what? Confront a dangerous criminal while May performs her recital? Nora felt a chill despite the cafe's warmth. More than confront. Julian has assembled a team to extract evidence from Vogel's private office during the performance. While everyone's attention is on May, he plans to access restricted areas of the conservatory. That's insane. More than insane, it's unauthorized. Julian's superiors approved his retrieval of May as a humanitarian consideration given his relationship to her. They explicitly forbade any action against Vogel during this operation. Thomas's voice dropped even lower. But Julian has assembled a separate team off the books. He's planning to extract both May and evidence from Vogel's private offices during the recital. Why are you telling me this? Why not report him to your superiors? Because I've worked with Julian for 12 years. He's not just a colleague. He's my friend. If I report him officially, his career is over. He'll likely face criminal charges himself. Thomas's expression softened slightly. And because I believe he's not thinking clearly. Grief and guilt over Vivian, desperation to protect his daughter, they've compromised his judgment. And you think I can talk him out of this? I think you're the only person who might be able to. He loves you, Mrs. Mercer. Whatever lies he's told, whatever secrets he's kept, that much I know is true. Nora sat back, absorbing this new information. Not only had Julian hidden his true identity and his daughter's existence, but he was now planning a rogue operation that could put all of them at risk. Have you spoken to him since last night? Thomas asked. No. I needed space to think. Understandable, but time is critical. The recital is scheduled for Sunday afternoon, and Julian's parallel operation is already in motion. Assets are being positioned, surveillance established. What exactly are you asking me to do? Talk to him. Make him see that protecting May has to be the priority. Convince him to let the agency handle Vogel through proper channels, even if justice takes longer that way. And if I can't convince him? If he's determined to pursue this vendetta? Thomas's expression turned grim again. Then I'll have no choice but to report him, for his own safety, and for yours and May's. After Thomas left, Nora remained at the cafe, watching rain streak the windows as evening descended. The weight of responsibility pressed down on her, not just for her own future but potentially for Julian's career, for May's safety, for justice for a woman she had never met. Her phone buzzed with a text from Julian, "Please come home. We need to talk about everything." For the first time since leaving the apartment, Nora replied, "I'll be there in an hour." The secrets we keep to protect the ones we love can sometimes become the very things that tear us apart. If you've ever had to make an impossible choice between truth and protection, hit the like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. The apartment was quiet when she arrived, a single lamp illuminating the living room where Julian sat waiting. He looked haggard, unshaven, still wearing the same clothes from the previous day. When he saw her, he rose but didn't approach, respecting the invisible boundary between them. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice rough with emotion or exhaustion, perhaps both. "I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't." Nora remained standing, not ready to settle into the familiar comfort of their home. "I met with Thomas Keller again today." Wariness flickered across Julian's face. "What did he tell you?" "That you're planning some kind of unauthorized operation against Heinrich Vogel during May's recital. That you've assembled a team outside official channels." She watched his expression carefully. "Is it true?" Julian closed his eyes briefly, his shoulders slumping. "Yes." "Are you insane? You're planning to confront a dangerous criminal during a 12-year-old girl's performance? You're willing to put May at risk to satisfy your need for revenge?" "It's not about revenge," Julian insisted, a flash of intensity she'd rarely seen breaking through his carefully maintained control. "It's about justice for Vivian. It's about making sure Vogel can never hurt anyone else. The evidence exists in his private office, evidence that would connect him not just to Vivian's death but to years of forgery, exploitation, corruption. And you couldn't pursue this through official channels because I've tried for 2 years. The agency won't authorize an operation based on my personal connection to the case. They consider me compromised, too emotionally involved." "They're right," Nora said quietly. "You are compromised. You're so focused on punishing Vogel that you're willing to risk everything, your career, your freedom, May's safety, our future. I've planned for every contingency. The team I've assembled is experienced, careful. The operation will take place while Vogel is attending the recital in the main hall. You and May will be safely backstage with additional security. Do you hear yourself? This isn't a movie, Julian. This is our life. May's life. What happens if something goes wrong? What happens if you're caught, arrested, or worse? What do I tell your daughter then?" The question landed like a physical blow. Julian sank back onto the couch, his face in his hands. "I can't let him get away with it, Nora. I can't just watch May perform and walk away, knowing he'll never face consequences for what he did to Vivian. Why not? Why can't May's safety be enough?" Nora finally moved closer, though she didn't sit. "Or is this really about guilt? About the fact that you weren't there to protect Vivian, and now you're trying to atone through revenge? You don't understand what Vogel is capable of. As long as he's free, May will never be completely safe. He knows who she is, Nora. He knows she's Vivian's daughter. Does he know she's yours?" Julian hesitated. "I don't think so. Vivian was very careful to keep my identity separate from their lives. But you can't be certain. If there's even a small chance he suspects May is your daughter, your presence at the recital could put her at greater risk, not less. That's why the operation has to happen simultaneously. We extract the evidence needed to bring Vogel down while May performs. By the time he realizes what's happening, it will be too late. And if something goes wrong? If Vogel realizes what's happening? You said yourself he has connections throughout the musical establishment. Julian had no answer for that, the silence stretching between them filled with unspoken fears. I want to meet May, Nora said finally. I want to be there tomorrow when she arrives, to welcome her as we planned. But I will not be part of any unauthorized operation, and I will not allow you to put her at risk for your personal vendetta. What are you saying? I'm saying you have a choice to make, Julian. Justice for Vivian or a future with your daughter. Because you can't guarantee both, no matter how carefully you've planned. That's not fair. None of this is fair. Not to me. Not to May. Not to Vivian. But these are the consequences of your choices, of the lies you've built your life around. Nora moved toward the door, exhaustion suddenly overwhelming her. You have until tomorrow to decide. Either you contact your superiors and cancel this rogue operation, or I'll do it for you. You would do that? Report me to the agency? To protect an innocent child? Yes, I would. Nora paused at the doorway. Whatever happens between us, whatever I decide about our marriage, May deserves better than to be caught in the crossfire of your guilt and Vogel's crimes. Where are you going? Back to Rosa's. I need more time away from all of this. She gestured vaguely at the apartment around them, the physical manifestation of the life they had built on Julian's deception. Call me when you've made your decision. The next 24 hours passed in a haze of uncertainty for Nora. She returned to work at the conservatory, finding solace in the familiar routines of teaching and evaluation. Here, at least, music was authentic. Interpretations could be genuine, technique honest. Professor Blackwell. Pascal appeared at her office door late in the afternoon. The DNA test results you requested came in. The lab said it was a priority order. Nora looked up from the score she had been annotating. Yes, thank you. The sealed envelope felt impossibly heavy in her hands. Though Julian had already confessed to being May's biological father, part of Nora had still hoped for some alternate explanation, some less devastating truth. She opened the envelope slowly, scanning the clinical language until she reached the conclusion, 99.9997% probability of paternity. Genetic markers confirming Julian Mercer as the biological father of the child identified as Mei Lin Chen. Science had confirmed what her heart had already accepted. May was Julian's daughter, conceived during his relationship with Vivian before he met Nora. Whatever else he had lied about, this fundamental truth was now irrefutable. Her phone rang as she was staring at the test results. Julian's name flashed on the screen. Yes, she answered, her voice carefully neutral. I've made my decision. He sounded different, clearer, calmer, as if a weight had been lifted. I contacted my superiors this morning. Told them everything, about my relationship with Vivian, about my suspicions regarding Vogel, about the unauthorized operation I was planning. And they've placed me on administrative leave pending review. The recital will continue as scheduled, but I'll be under supervision during the entire event. No contact with Vogel. No access to any restricted areas of the conservatory. What about your team? The operation you had planned? Disbanded. My superiors are evaluating the intelligence I've gathered, deciding whether to pursue an official investigation through proper channels. Nora closed her eyes, relief washing through her. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. There's more you need to know. Julian's voice dropped lower. My career with the agency is likely over regardless of what happens with Vogel. I violated too many protocols, compromised too many operations. The best I can hope for is a quiet resignation rather than criminal charges. I'm sorry. Despite everything, she found she meant it. Julian's work had clearly been central to his identity for years. Don't be. It's been coming for a long time, since Vivian died, really. I haven't been objective or professional. I've been obsessed with justice at any cost. He paused. But you were right. May's safety has to come first. Her future matters more than avenging the past. Does this mean we're still welcoming May tomorrow? Still going forward with the recital? That depends on you, Nora. My superiors have approved the mentorship to continue, but only if you're still willing to be part of it. May needs musical guidance, not just a father with a complicated past. Nora looked down at the DNA test results in her hand, thinking of the solemn little girl she had seen only in photographs. I still want to meet her. Beyond that, I can't make any promises right now. There's too much we need to resolve between us. I understand. A pause. And Nora, whatever you decide about us, about our marriage, I want you to know that my love for you was never part of my cover. It was always real, even when everything else was constructed. She had no response to that, no way to separate truth from lies in the wreckage of their relationship. I need to go, Julian. We can talk more tomorrow. That night, Nora sat on Rosa's balcony, watching stars appear in the clearing sky. Her friend joined her, offering a steaming mug of herbal tea. Any clearer? Rosa asked, settling into the adjacent chair. About some things. Julian has agreed to abandon his unauthorized operation. The recital will proceed with official oversight. May will be safe. And the two of you? Nora sighed, cradling the warm mug between her palms. That's the part I'm still struggling with. How do you forgive something like this? How do you rebuild trust after such fundamental deception? Maybe you don't, Rosa suggested gently. Maybe you acknowledge that the marriage you thought you had is over, and you decide whether you want to build something new with the man you now know Julian to be. The problem is, I'm not sure I know who that is yet. The investigative agent, the grieving ex-lover, the father desperate to reconnect with his daughter, the husband who couldn't bear to touch me because of his guilt. Nora shook her head. Who is the real Julian Mercer? Perhaps he's all of those things. People aren't musical scores, Nora. They can't be interpreted and performed so precisely. We're all collections of contradictions and complexities. But most people don't build their entire lives on deliberate deception. No, Rosa agreed. And you have every right to walk away from this marriage. No one would blame you. She paused, choosing her next words carefully. But before you decide, ask yourself this, are you more angry about the lies themselves or about what they reveal about Julian? About the fact that he had a life, a love, a child before you? Nora had been asking herself variations of the same question for days. Both. I think the lies themselves are devastating, the betrayal of trust, the years of deception. But yes, there's also this irrational hurt about Vivian, about May, that he could love someone so deeply, create a child with her, and then enter our marriage carrying that secret. Jealousy is natural, even of a woman who's no longer living. It's not just jealousy. It's that he watched me struggle to redefine my career after my injury, saw what that loss did to my identity, all while knowing he had this whole other life he was concealing. Nora set down her tea, wrapping her arms around herself against the evening chill. How could he witness that pain and not tell me the truth? I don't know, Rosa admitted. That's something only Julian can answer. The question is whether you're willing to hear his explanation. Learning to love someone means accepting their past, present, and future, even the parts that hurt. If this story has touched your heart, please hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and share with someone who needs to hear that sometimes the deepest truths emerge from our most painful discoveries. 3 days later, Nora returned to their apartment, not to stay, not yet, but to prepare for May's arrival. Julian had been calling daily, respecting her need for space, but making it clear he was ready to talk whenever she was. He met her at the door, stepping back to let her enter what had once been their shared sanctuary. The apartment felt different now, as if the revelations of the past week had physically altered the space they had so carefully created together. "Thank you for coming," Julian said, leading her to the music room rather than the living room where their confrontation had occurred. He had prepared tea, remembering how she took it without asking, one of the small intimacies that had once seemed so natural but now felt like artifacts of a relationship that no longer existed. "I have questions," Nora began, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. "Things I need to understand before I can decide about the recital, about us, about anything. Everything. No more secrets. Tell me about Vivian. Not just her connection to your work, but who she was to you." It was perhaps the most difficult question, but the one she needed answered first. Julian's expression softened at the name, pain and tenderness mingling in his eyes. She was brilliant, fluent in 4 languages, with this uncanny ability to hear subtle differences in tone that most people miss. "We met at a master class in Taipei. I was there undercover investigating the conservatory where she taught as a violin instructor." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I wasn't supposed to get personally involved with anyone during the assignment. It compromises operational security, creates vulnerabilities. But Vivian, she saw through me somehow. Not my cover, but the walls I had built around myself after years of living different identities. You loved her. It wasn't a question. Yes. It wasn't planned, wasn't supposed to happen, but it did. And then it became even more complicated when she approached me with concerns about forgeries at the conservatory. She had discovered evidence of counterfeit instruments being used to defraud students and donors, connections to Vogel's network. She became your informant." Julian nodded. "Officially, on the books, that's what she was. Unofficially, we had 8 months together before my assignment ended. 8 months of real connection in the middle of a constructed reality. And you never told her who you really were. She knew I wasn't who I claimed to be. She knew I worked for an international arts protection agency. But no, she never knew my real name, my nationality, my full background. That information would have put her at risk if my cover was ever compromised. So she loved a man who didn't fully exist. She loved the parts of me that were real beneath the cover identity. The same parts one hoped you fell in love with." Julian met her eyes directly. "When my assignment ended, we agreed to part ways. My next deployment was already scheduled, different country, different identity. Clean breaks are essential in our line of work. But she was pregnant. Yes, though neither of us knew it then. She discovered it a few weeks after I left. By her own account, she debated whether to tell me at all." A shadow crossed his face. "She finally reached out through secure channels when May was nearly 2 years old. By then, you and I had already met. Why did she contact you after keeping the secret for so long?" She was worried about her work with the authorities investigating Vogel. She wanted to establish a contingency plan for May if anything happened to her. Julian's voice roughened. She was right to be concerned. The accident, the brake lines were cut. Vivian had arranged to meet with prosecutors the next day, prepared to testify against Vogel with documentation she had been gathering for years. May was supposed to be with her that day, but had a fever. A neighbor was watching her while Vivian went to pick up medication. Julian's hands clenched around his tea mug. If May had been in that car. Nora could see the horror of that possibility reflected in his eyes. What happened after Vivian died? I didn't find out immediately. We had arranged specific secure communication protocols, and when she missed 2 scheduled check-ins, I began to worry. It took nearly 3 weeks to confirm what had happened, to verify that May had been placed in the State Music Academy with no known relatives. And that's when everything changed between us. Yes. Julian looked down, shame evident in his posture. I was devastated, consumed with guilt. If I had never involved Vivian in the investigation, if I had been there to protect her, if I had acknowledged May from the beginning, the guilt was crushing. Nora, I couldn't bear to touch you, to be intimate, while carrying that burden. But you couldn't tell me the truth either. I should have. That's my greatest regret. But my work was classified. My relationship with Vivian had been unauthorized, and acknowledging May would have meant revealing everything. I convinced myself it was safer for everyone if I maintained a separation between my past and our life together. Until Vivian died and May ended up in an orphanage. Yes. I spent months trying to find a legal way to bring her home without compromising my cover or my ongoing operations. International mentorship was the solution my superiors finally approved, a humanitarian consideration given my biological connection to her. But they didn't approve your vendetta against Vogel. No. They considered me too emotionally involved, too compromised to be objective. They were right. Julian set down his mug, leaning forward with intensity. But I couldn't let it go, Nora. The man who killed Vivian, who would have killed May if she had been in that car, he was going to walk away clean. I couldn't accept that. So you planned your own operation outside official channels, risking your career, your freedom, potentially even May's safety. I believed I could do both, bring May into our lives safely and ensure Vogel faced justice. I was wrong. Blinded by guilt and grief and rage. Julian ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration she had seen countless times but now understood in a new context. You made me see that, made me understand that May's future has to matter more than avenging Vivian's past. Nora was quiet for a long moment, absorbing everything he had shared. The pieces were aligning now, the inconsistencies explained, the timeline coherent, but understanding didn't automatically lead to forgiveness. I need to know one more thing, she said finally. All these years, all the work we've done with young musicians, our grief over my ended performance career, was any of that real for you? Knowing you already had a child somewhere else? Pain flashed across Julian's face. All of it was real, Nora. I wanted to build a musical legacy with you more than anything. I grieved your injury as deeply as you did. The fact that May existed didn't change my desire to create something meaningful with you. But it feels like such a cruel irony now, that we poured ourselves into mentoring other people's children while your biological child was growing up without you. I know. And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make amends for that deception, to both of you. Julian hesitated, then asked the question she knew had been weighing on him. Can you ever forgive me, Nora? Not just for the lies, but for everything they represent. I don't know, she answered honestly. I'm still processing all of this, still trying to reconcile the man I married with the man sitting before me now. She took a deep breath, making the decision she had been considering since their last conversation. But I do know that I want to meet May. I want to welcome her tomorrow, to help her prepare for the recital, to do what we promised. Relief washed over Julian's face. Thank you. She deserves a chance at a normal recital, a stable musical environment. I'm not doing it for you, Nora clarified. I'm doing it for her, an innocent child who has lost her mother and spent 2 years in an institutional setting. She deserves better than to be another casualty of the choices adults have made around her. And us? Our marriage? That's a separate question. One I can't answer yet. Nora stood, signaling the end of their conversation for now. We welcome May tomorrow. We support her through the recital on Sunday. After that, when she's back in her dormitory, feeling secure about her performance, then we can address our future. Julian nodded, accepting her terms. One day at a time. One truth at a time, Nora corrected. No more secrets, no more lies. If we have any chance of moving forward, it has to be with complete honesty between us. I promise, Julian said solemnly. No more secrets. From now on, you know everything I know. Mei Lin Chen arrived the next afternoon, a small figure standing in the doorway of their apartment, violin case clutched tightly in one hand, a neatly packed weekend bag in the other. At 12, she was slight for her age, with delicate features that Nora now recognized as echoes of the woman in the pendant. But the way she held herself, the careful confidence as she stepped over the threshold, that was unmistakably Julian. "Welcome, May," Nora said, summoning every bit of her professional warmth. "We're so glad you're here for the weekend." The girl bowed slightly, a gesture both formal and endearing. "Thank you for having me, Professor Blackwell. I have been practicing very hard for Sunday." Julian stood slightly behind Nora, his composure perfect except for the trembling Nora detected in his hands. This was the first time he had seen his daughter in person, the child he had known about for years but never met, the living legacy of a woman he had loved and lost. "Hello, May," he said, his voice remarkably steady. "We've been looking forward to working with you on the final preparations." May turned to him, her dark eyes assessing in that eerily perceptive way Nora had noticed in her photographs. "I have been working on the Sibelius, Mr. Mercer. The melodic line in the second section is still giving me trouble. We'll solve that together," he promised. "But first, let me show you to your room. You must be tired after the journey from your dormitory." As Julian led May upstairs, Nora remained in the entryway, trying to process the surreal nature of the situation. Here was Julian's daughter, walking through their home, completely unaware of her true connection to the man guiding her up the stairs. How much of May's musical talent came from Vivian? How much from Julian? Would she ever know the truth about her parentage? The weekend unfolded in a strange choreography of pretense and genuine connection. During the day, they worked with May on her repertoire, fine-tuning phrases, adjusting dynamics, polishing the technical passages that would showcase her remarkable talent. In the evenings, they shared meals, listened to recordings, discussed the history and context of the pieces she would perform. Throughout it all, Nora watched Julian with new awareness. The tenderness in his eyes when May mastered a difficult passage. The careful distance he maintained, never touching her except to adjust a hand position or demonstrate a bowing technique. The way he sometimes seemed to forget to breathe when she played, as if the music physically affected him. May, for her part, was everything her recordings had promised, technically brilliant, emotionally intuitive, with that rare combination of discipline and natural expressiveness that marked truly exceptional musicians. But beneath her composure, Nora detected flashes of something else, a watchfulness, a guardedness that spoke of a child who had learned early to protect herself. "You play beautifully," Nora told her Saturday evening as they finished their final rehearsal. "But I sense you're holding something back in the Sibelius. There's a vulnerability in the second movement that you're not quite revealing." May lowered her violin, her expression serious. "My mother used to say the same thing. That I was afraid to show too much feeling in my playing." Julian, who had been adjusting the piano bench, went very still. "Your mother was a musician too?" Nora asked gently, though she already knew the answer. "She was a violin teacher. The best in Taipei." A shadow crossed the girl's face. "She died 2 years ago." "I'm sorry, May. That must have been very difficult for you." The girl nodded, her composure cracking slightly. "She always told me that when we play, we must be honest. That the audience can always tell when we're hiding." "She was right," Julian said, his voice rough with emotion. "Music demands truth from us. It's what makes it so powerful, and sometimes so frightening." "Is that why you stopped performing, Professor Blackwell?" May asked suddenly. "My dormitory supervisor said you were a famous pianist before your injury." "Partly," Nora answered, surprised by the question. "I couldn't play at the technical level I needed after the surgeries. But also, I think I was afraid of what the music might reveal about me. About my pain, my disappointment. My mother said music always finds a way to speak the truth, even when we try to silence it." May raised her violin again. "I will try to be more honest in the second movement tomorrow." That night, after May had gone to bed, Nora and Julian sat in the kitchen, the day's events settling around them like dust after a performance. "She has Vivian's insight," Julian said quietly. "That ability to cut through pretense. And your intensity," Nora added. The way she focuses when she plays, that's all you. Do you think she suspects anything about who I really am to her? I don't know. Children can sense connections, undercurrents that adults try to hide. But I don't think she knows the specific truth. Should I tell her? The question hung in the air between them. After the recital, before she returns to the dormitory, Nora considered this carefully. Not yet. She needs stability right now, not another upheaval. The recital is too important to her future at the conservatory. Julian nodded, relief and disappointment mingling in his expression. And after? If everything goes well tomorrow, if my superiors clear me to maintain contact with her, then we take it slowly. We build trust. We create a relationship based on honesty going forward. Nora met his eyes directly. And we let her decide how much truth she's ready to hear. The Vienna Conservatory's Grand Hall was filled to capacity the next afternoon. May's recital, positioned as the centerpiece of the Spring Scholarship Program, had attracted not only the usual faculty and students but also several prominent figures from the European classical music scene. Among them, seated prominently in the third row, was Heinrich Vogel, elegant in a tailored suit, his silver hair gleaming under the hall's crystal chandeliers. Backstage, May was the picture of focused calm, warming up with scales and brief passages from her repertoire. Julian moved through the pre-performance rituals with professional detachment, though Nora could see the tension in the set of his shoulders, the way his eyes kept darting toward the stage entrance where two conservatively dressed men, undoubtedly his agency's surveillance team, maintained a casual but watchful presence. Are you ready? Nora asked May, helping her adjust her concert attire, a simple dark blue dress that highlighted her serious demeanor without trying to make her appear older than her 12 years. I think so. For the first time all weekend, uncertainty flickered across the girl's face. What if I forget the passage in the development section? What if my bow shakes during the pianissimo? Julian knelt before her, meeting her eyes directly. Listen to me, May. You've prepared thoroughly. You know these pieces in your bones. But even if something goes wrong, even if you miss a note or your bow shakes or you forget an entire section, the music itself will carry you through. How can you be sure? Because music is more forgiving than we think. It doesn't demand perfection, it demands honesty. His voice softened. Your mother understood that. She would be so proud of you today, not because you'll play perfectly, but because you're brave enough to share your heart through your playing. Something shifted in May's expression, a recognition, perhaps, of a truth she hadn't expected to hear from this man she had known only as a mentor. For a moment, Nora thought she might question him, might somehow sense the deeper connection between them. But then the stage manager appeared, announcing 5 minutes until her performance. Remember to breathe, Nora told her, giving her shoulder a gentle squeeze. We'll be right here the entire time. As May walked onto the stage, her small figure suddenly commanding in the spotlight, Nora felt Julian's hand find hers in the darkness of the wings. She didn't pull away. The recital was transcendent. May played with a technical precision that belied her years, but it was the emotional depth of her interpretation that silenced the hall, particularly in the Sibelius, where her approach to the second movement revealed a vulnerability, a raw honesty that drew audible gasps from several audience members. When she finished the final piece, the applause erupted like a thunderstorm, rolling through the hall in waves. From their position backstage, Nora and Julian could see Heinrich Vogel in his third-row seat, joining the standing ovation with practiced enthusiasm, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. He knows, Julian whispered. Look at him, he recognizes her playing style. He knows she's Vivian's daughter. But he doesn't know she's yours, Nora reassured him. And thanks to your superior's intervention, he never will. May returned for 3 curtain calls, her solemn face finally breaking into a genuine smile as she clutched a bouquet of white roses presented by Director Bauer. When she finally rejoined them backstage, her cheeks were flushed with triumph. You were magnificent, Nora told her, embracing her without hesitation. Absolutely magnificent. The Sibelius was perfect, Julian added, his voice thick with emotion. Your mother would have been so proud. May looked up at him, something like recognition flickering in her dark eyes. How did you know what my mother would think? Did you know her? The moment hung suspended, Julian caught between truth and deception once more. Nora held her breath. I knew of her, he answered carefully. Her reputation as a teacher was well known in international circles. And I can hear her influence in your playing, the way you approach the emotional phrases, the honesty in your interpretation. May seemed to accept this, though her gaze lingered on his face a moment longer than necessary. I felt her with me today. When I was playing the second movement, it was like she was guiding my bow. She was, Nora said gently. Through everything she taught you, through the love she gave you, she's still with you, May. Always. The reception following the recital was a whirl of congratulations and scholarly praise. Director Bauer announced that May had been awarded a full scholarship to continue her studies at the conservatory, with special arrangements for her to receive private instruction from both Julian and Nora twice weekly. Throughout it all, Heinrich Vogel remained at a careful distance, though his eyes followed the girl with an intensity that made Julian's jaw clench. When they finally returned to their apartment that evening, May exhausted but exhilarated by her success, the weight of the past week seemed temporarily lifted. They shared a celebratory dinner, listening to May's excited recounting of each moment of her performance, her normally reserved demeanor giving way to the natural enthusiasm of a 12-year-old experiencing her first major triumph. My dormitory supervisor won't believe it when I tell her about the standing ovation, she said, yawning despite her excitement. Or about Director Bauer's announcement. You've earned every bit of it, Julian told her. Your hard work, your dedication, they showed in every note today. Will I really get to study with both of you twice a week now? May asked, looking between them with hopeful eyes. Nora glanced at Julian, a silent communication passing between them. That's the plan, she confirmed. If that's what you want. It is. May nodded solemnly. I learn differently from each of you. Mr. Mercer understands how I think about the music, and you, Professor Blackwell, you help me express what I feel about it. Then that's what we'll do, Julian promised. Together. Later, after May had gone to bed and they stood alone in the kitchen, the word echoed between them. Together. What happens now? Julian asked softly. With us? Nora took a deep breath, the question she had been avoiding for days finally demanding an answer. I don't know if I can ever fully trust you again, Julian. The foundation of what we had has been shattered. His face fell, but he nodded in acceptance. I understand. But, she continued, I also saw something today that I can't ignore. The connection between you and May, it's real, it's powerful, and it matters. Not just to you, but to her, even if she doesn't understand it yet. What are you saying? I'm saying that maybe we can build something new. Not a marriage based on secrets and compartmentalized lives, but a partnership focused on May's well-being. A collaboration based on complete honesty going forward. And us? The personal part of us? That will take time. I need to get to know you again, the real you, all of you. And you need to learn how to live without a cover, how to be fully present in one life rather than divided between many. Nora met his gaze directly. I'm willing to try if you are. But it has to be different this time. I want that more than anything. Julian's voice was rough with emotion. A chance to be honest, to be whole. With you. With May. Eventually. One truth at a time, Nora said, echoing her earlier words. One day at a time. One melody at a time. In the guest room down the hall, Mei Lin Chen slept peacefully, her violin case open beside her bed, the instrument that had been her mother's resting inside. In her dreams, music flowed. Not perfect, not flawless, but honest. True. As her mother had taught her, as her mentors now guided her, as her own heart was learning to play. The truth was a symphony still unfolding, its final movement yet to be written. But for tonight, in this moment of pause between phrases, there was hope in the silence. A promise of resolution, of harmony yet to come. What would you have done in Nora's position? Could you forgive such profound deception for the sake of an innocent child? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that explore the complex nature of truth, forgiveness, and the families we build through both blood and choice. The weeks following May's triumphant recital unfolded in a careful choreography of new beginnings. Twice weekly, she arrived at their apartment for lessons, her talent blooming under their shared mentorship. Julian, officially on extended leave from the agency, devoted himself entirely to teaching, while Nora watched the gradual transformation of both father and daughter with a mixture of wonder and caution. May remained unaware of the true connection between them, yet Nora observed subtle resonances, the identical furrow of concentration between their brows when tackling a difficult passage, their shared tendency to close their eyes during particularly emotional phrases, the way their hands moved with the same economy of motion when demonstrating a technique. "She holds the bow exactly like you," Nora commented one evening after May had left, returning to her dormitory with new scores to study. Julian, who had been watching from the window as the conservatory car pulled away, turned with surprise. "Does she? I hadn't noticed." "Some things are inherited, not taught," Nora replied softly. "Her intuitive understanding of structure, the way she anticipates harmonic shifts, that's pure Julian Mercer." A smile touched his lips, small, uncertain. "And her phrasing? The way she builds emotion through a piece. That must be Vivian." Nora moved to stand beside him at the window. "You hear it most in the Sibelius. There's an authenticity there that can't be taught." They stood together in comfortable silence, the first such moment they had shared since the revelations that had shattered their marriage. In the month since May's recital, they had established a new rhythm, Julian staying in the guest room, their interactions focused primarily on May's development, personal conversations conducted with the careful diplomacy of new acquaintances rather than estranged spouses. "My final hearing with the agency is tomorrow," Julian said finally. "They've completed their investigation into my unauthorized activities." Nora glanced at him. "What do you expect will happen?" "Official resignation, most likely. They're offering a quiet exit, no charges, no public disclosure, provided I surrender all operational information and agree to certain restrictions going forward." "How do you feel about that? About leaving the work that's defined you for so long?" Julian considered this, his expression thoughtful rather than regretful. "Relieved, actually. I've been living divided lives for so long that I'm not sure I remember what it means to be just one person, in one place, with one purpose." "And what is that purpose now?" "May." He turned to face her fully. "Being whatever she needs me to be, mentor, teacher, and someday, if she's ready to know, father." "And the investigation into Vogel? The justice you were so determined to secure for Vivian?" A shadow crossed Julian's face. "My superiors have launched an official inquiry based on the evidence I gathered. It's proceeding slowly, methodically, no dramatic raids or confrontations, just patient documentation and testimony gathering. The proper way, as you pointed out. Will it be enough to finally bring him to justice? I have to believe it will. The alternative." He shook his head. "The alternative consumed me before. I can't let that happen again." Nora studied him, seeing changes that went beyond the physical, beyond the slightly longer hair or the casual clothes that had replaced his producer's uniform of tailored suits. There was a groundedness to him now, an authenticity that hadn't been there before. "Would you like me to go with you tomorrow?" she asked, surprising herself with the offer. "To the hearing?" The question clearly caught him off guard. "You would do that?" "I think it might help me understand everything. Who you were, who you're becoming." "I'd like that," he said simply. "Thank you." The International Arts Protection Agency occupied an unassuming building in Vienna's diplomatic quarter, its entrance discreetly marked with a cultural heritage emblem that gave no hint of the clandestine operations coordinated within. Nora sat in an austere waiting room while Julian disappeared into a conference chamber, the minutes stretching into hours as his debriefing continued. When he finally emerged, his expression was both weary and relieved. Thomas Keller followed, extending a hand to Nora as Julian gathered his belongings. "Mrs. Mercer. It's good to see you under less dramatic circumstances." "Is it over?" she asked, looking between the two men. For Julian, yes, Thomas confirmed. His resignation has been accepted, with certain confidentiality provisions that he'll explain. "And Vogel?" A tight smile crossed Thomas's weathered face. "Let's just say the wheels of justice are turning. Slowly but inexorably." Outside, in the pale spring sunshine, Julian took a deep breath as if tasting freedom for the first time. 12 years, he said. 12 years of codes and cover stories and compartmentalized truths. What happens now? Now I become Julian Mercer in truth, not just in name. Music producer, teacher, mentor. He glanced at her. "The rest is up to you, Nora." She understood the unspoken question. I think it's time we had dinner together. A real dinner, not just discussing May's progress or scheduling lessons." "I'd like that. And I think it's time we started talking about when and how to tell May the truth. Not immediately, but we need a plan. She deserves to know her history, her connection to Vivian and to you." Julian nodded, the prospect clearly both terrifying and exhilarating. How do you tell a child that her mentor is actually her father? That her entire life has been shaped by secrets and half-truths? With honesty. With compassion. And most importantly, with her needs at the center, not ours. Sometimes the music of our lives needs a complete rearrangement to find its true harmony. If you believe in second chances and the healing power of truth, please hit that subscribe button and join us for more stories that explore the complicated symphonies of human relationships. The dinner was awkward at first, both of them navigating the strange territory between the intimacy of their past and the careful distance of their present. They chose a small restaurant in the Spittelberg Quarter, away from the conservatory circle where they might be recognized. "Tell me about Vivian," Nora said after they had ordered, the request no longer painful but necessary. Not the informant, not the victim, the musician, the mother. Julian's expression softened with memory. She was fearless. Technically brilliant but never cold, she played Paganini with the same emotional depth she brought to Bruch or Tchaikovsky. When she taught, she could pinpoint exactly where a student was holding back, not just technically but emotionally. That explains May's unusual maturity as a performer. Vivian believed music was truth in its purest form. She used to say that a false note was less problematic than a false emotion. He smiled sadly. She was building something special in Taipei before she discovered the forgery operation, a teaching methodology that combined Eastern discipline with Western expressiveness. May was her first true student in that approach. Do you see her when May plays? In every phrase. Julian's eyes held a distant look. But I also see something uniquely May. She's not just a continuation of either of us, she's her own musician, finding her own voice. That's as it should be. As the evening progressed, the conversation flowed more naturally. They discussed music, teaching philosophies, memories of their early years together, rediscovering parts of their connection that had existed before the deception, that perhaps could exist after it. I've missed this, Julian admitted as they walked home through Vienna's lamplit streets. Just talking with you. Being honest. So have I, Nora said. Not just for the past month, but for the past 2 years. Even before I knew about May, about your work, I missed you. I was there but not there. Exactly. He hesitated before asking, do you think we can find our way back? Not to what we had, but to something new. Something real. Nora considered this carefully. I think we're already starting. But it will take time, Julian. Trust rebuilds slowly, like a muscle recovering from injury. There's no shortcut. I understand. His voice was gentle. I have nothing but time now. And for the first time in my adult life, I don't have to be anywhere else, anyone else. When they reached their apartment building, Nora made a decision. Would you like to practice together tomorrow? Before May's lesson. There's a Bach piece I've been working on that needs violin accompaniment. The invitation, their first musical collaboration since before the Revelations, clearly moved him. I'd like that very much. Music became their bridge in the weeks that followed. They practiced together in the mornings, rediscovering the artistic connection that had first drawn them to each other. Sometimes they played for hours, losing themselves in Brahms or Beethoven, communicating through phrases and harmonies what they still struggled to express in words. May noticed the change immediately. You play together again, she observed during one of her lessons, her perceptiveness as sharp as ever. Like in the recordings Professor Blackwell showed me from before her injury. We're finding our way back to it, Nora explained, exchanging a glance with Julian. My mother said that true musicians never really stop playing together, even when they're apart, May said, her fingers absently tracing patterns on her violin case. That the music keeps connecting them. Julian's breath caught audibly. Your mother was very wise. I dream about her sometimes, May continued, with the sudden openness that occasionally broke through her composed exterior. She's playing, but I can't hear the music. I just see her hands moving, her face smiling. She looked up at Julian, her dark eyes searching. Do you think that means something? I think it means she's still with you, he said gently. Still guiding you, even if you can't always hear the guidance clearly. Later, after May had left, Nora found Julian standing motionless in the music room, staring at the empty chair where his daughter had sat. She's ready, he said without turning. She's starting to ask questions, to look for connections. We need to tell her. Are you sure? No. He gave a short laugh. I'm terrified. But I think it's time. Before she starts putting pieces together on her own and feels we've deceived her further. Then we'll prepare, Nora agreed. We'll find the right words, the right moment. The right moment presented itself 3 days later when Director Bauer called with startling news. Heinrich Vogel had been arrested quietly in the early hours of the morning. The international investigation Julian had initiated had finally gathered enough evidence to move against him, uncovering not only the forgery operation but financial crimes and corruption extending throughout several conservatories in Europe and Asia. They found documentation in his private vault, Julian explained, hanging up the phone, his expression stunned. Records of payments, threats, surveillance, including files on Vivian. Will it be enough to prove he was responsible for her death? Bauer says the evidence is overwhelming. They even found the mechanic who tampered with her brakes. Julian sank into a chair, the vindication he had sought for so long finally within reach, yet bringing a complexity of emotions rather than simple triumph. It's over. The proper way, through proper channels. You were right. Not about everything, Nora said softly. I understand now why you couldn't let it go. Why justice mattered so much. That evening, they called May's dormitory supervisor and arranged for her to spend the weekend with them, ostensibly to prepare for an upcoming masterclass, but in reality, to finally share the truth that would forever change her understanding of her place in the world. She arrived Friday afternoon, violin case in hand, unaware of the revelations waiting. They spent the evening normally, practicing, sharing dinner, discussing repertoire for the upcoming term. But as Saturday morning dawned, Julian's nervousness was palpable, his usual grace replaced by uncharacteristic clumsiness as he prepared breakfast. Is something wrong? May asked, her observant eyes missing nothing. You seem different today. Julian exchanged a glance with Nora, who nodded encouragingly. May, he began, setting aside the coffee pot with slightly trembling hands. There's something very important, Nora, and I need to talk with you about. Something about your mother, and about me. The girl went very still, her hands folded in her lap. Is it about why you knew her? I always wondered how you really knew about her teaching methods. Julian blinked in surprise. You suspected? I'm not a child, she said with the dignified indignation of a 12-year-old. I noticed things. The way you talked about her sometimes, like you had actually heard her play. The way you have some of the same expressions she did when explaining a difficult passage. Nora couldn't help but smile at May's perceptiveness. You're very observant. My mother taught me to pay attention to details in music and in people. May looked directly at Julian. Were you friends with her? In Taipei? Julian took a deep breath. Yes, we were friends. Very close friends. I met her while I was working in Taiwan, before I met Nora, before you were born. Understanding began to dawn in May's dark eyes, not complete, but the beginnings of comprehension. How close? May, Julian said gently, moving to sit across from her at the table. I'm your father. The words hung in the air, simple yet monumental. May's expression remained carefully neutral, but Nora could see the rapid calculations happening behind those intelligent eyes, puzzles solving, questions forming, emotions rising. Biologically, she asked finally, her voice small but steady. Yes. Your mother and I were together for nearly a year. When my work took me back to Vienna, we decided to part ways. She didn't know she was pregnant when I left, and by the time she told me about you, I was already with Nora. Why didn't my mother ever tell me about you? To protect you. My work was complicated. Sometimes dangerous. Vivian felt it was safer if our connection remained private. May absorbed this, her face unreadable. And after she died? Why didn't you come for me right away? Why the whole mentorship arrangement? Julian glanced at Nora, his expression pained. That's where I made mistakes, May. Serious mistakes that hurt both you and Nora. I should have been honest from the beginning, but I was afraid of losing Nora, afraid of disrupting your life further, afraid of the people who had hurt your mother finding a connection to me through you. Heinrich Vogel, May said, surprising them both. The man who was arrested yesterday. All the students at the dormitory were talking about it this morning. Yes, Julian confirmed. He was behind the accident that killed your mother. He's being charged now, not just for corruption but for her death. May nodded, processing this with remarkable composure for someone her age. Then, with devastating directness, did you love her? My mother? Yes, Julian answered without hesitation. Very much. And do you love me? From the moment I knew you existed, he said, his voice breaking. Even when I couldn't be with you, couldn't acknowledge you, I've always loved you, May. She turned to Nora, her expression cautious. And you? You didn't know about me until recently? No, Nora confirmed gently. I learned the truth just before your recital. Are you angry? That he kept me secret? I was hurt, Nora admitted. Very hurt. But never because of you, May. You are extraordinary, as a musician and as a person. Learning about you was a shock, but never a disappointment. May fell silent, her gaze dropping to her hands folded precisely in her lap. When she looked up again, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. I need time to think. Is that okay? Of course, Julian said immediately. Take all the time you need. We'll answer any questions you have, whenever you're ready to ask them. May I go to my room now? I'd like to practice. Music helps me think. Of course, Nora said, recognizing the child's need for the familiar discipline of her instrument, the comfort of structured sound when words failed. For the next several hours, Sibelius flowed from the guest room, not the recital pieces but raw, more exploratory improvisations on the themes, as if May were working through her emotions through the only language that had never betrayed her. Julian sat in the living room, listening, his face in his hands. "I've hurt everyone I care about," he said when Nora joined him. "First you, now her." "She's processing," Nora reminded him. "She's remarkably resilient, Julian. And she's finally hearing the truth, which is what she deserves. What if she rejects me? Decides she doesn't want me as her father? Then we respect that and continue to be her mentors. We give her space to decide what relationship she wants with both of us." The violin fell silent around noon. When May emerged from her room, her face was composed once more, though her eyes were slightly reddened. "I have questions," she announced, standing before them with the formal posture her mother had instilled in her. "We'll answer everything we can," Julian promised. "Do I have to change my name? From Chen to Mercer?" "Only if you want to, and only when you're ready. There's no rush for any legal changes." She nodded, considering. "Will I still live at the dormitory? Or am I supposed to live here now?" Julian and Nora exchanged glances. They hadn't discussed this particular detail. "What would you prefer?" Nora asked carefully. May twisted her fingers together, the first sign of childlike uncertainty they had seen from her that day. "I like the dormitory. My friends are there, and my routine. But maybe I could stay here sometimes. More than just for lessons." "You could stay every weekend," Julian offered immediately. "We could turn the guest room into your room permanently, decorate it however you like." "And holidays," Nora added. "School breaks. Whenever you want." "A gradual transition," May said, nodding as if confirming a musical interpretation. "That seems logical." Her next question was directed solely at Nora, her gaze direct and searching. "Are you going to be my stepmother? Or just my teacher?" The question caught Nora off guard. She and Julian had been so focused on how to tell May the truth that they hadn't fully addressed the future of their own relationship in concrete terms. "I would be honored to be whatever you're comfortable with," she answered honestly. "Julian and I are rebuilding our relationship. Finding a new way forward together. But my care for you isn't dependent on that. Whether I'm your teacher, your mentor, or someday perhaps a stepmother, I'm here for you, May. That won't change." May seemed satisfied with this. "I have a photograph," she said suddenly, reaching into the pocket of her dress. "From my mother's things. The dormitory supervisor gave me a box of her possessions when I turned 12. She held out a small, worn photograph that Julian took with trembling hands. It showed a younger Vivian, smiling brightly at the camera, her violin case visible at her side. Next to her stood Julian, his arm around her shoulders, both of them captured in a moment of unguarded happiness. "I never knew who the man was," May explained. "But I kept it because my mother looked so happy." "That's you, isn't it?" "Yes," Julian confirmed, his voice thick. "That was taken at the Taipei Spring Music Festival, about 7 months before I left. You look different now. Your hair is grayer." Despite the emotional weight of the moment, Julian laughed. 8 years will do that. "May I see?" Nora asked, and May nodded permission. The photograph showed a Julian she had never known, younger, less polished, but with the same intensity in his eyes, the same subtle smile. And Vivian, beautiful, radiant, her posture showing the confident grace of a born musician. "You have her smile," Nora told May. "Exactly her smile." The girl took back the photograph, studying it with renewed understanding. "She never told me about you, but she kept this picture. She must have wanted me to know someday." "I believe she did," Julian said softly. "When it was safe." "Is it safe now?" "Yes. Vogel can't hurt anyone anymore." May nodded, processing this. "I need to practice more now. Real practice, not just thinking music." "Of course," Julian said, recognizing her need for the familiar structure of her routine, the comfort of directed sound after so much emotional turbulence. As May retrieved her violin, she paused in the doorway. "I'm not ready to call you father yet," she told Julian, her honesty unflinching. "But I think I might be someday. Is that okay?" "That's perfectly okay," he assured her, his voice steady despite the emotion Nora could see him fighting to control. "We have time, May. All the time you need." That night, after May had fallen asleep, Nora found Julian on the balcony, watching the lights of Vienna shimmer beneath a clear spring sky. "You did well today," she told him, joining him at the railing. "She's processing everything remarkably well." "She's extraordinary," he said simply. "Far more mature than I was at her age. Than I am now, perhaps. She has questions we haven't answered yet, about your work, about what happens next for all of us." "I know. But today was enough truth for anyone, especially a 12-year-old. Nora nodded agreement, then voiced the question that had been lingering since May's direct inquiry earlier: what does happen next? For us? Julian turned to face her, his expression more open than she had ever seen it. No masks, no compartmentalization, just raw honesty. "What do you want to happen, Nora? After everything I've put you through, I wouldn't blame you if you wanted to end our marriage once May is settled. Is that what you want?" "No." His answer was immediate. "What I want, what I've always wanted, is a real life with you. Not the half-truth we had before, but something complete. If that's even possible after everything." Nora considered this, the weight of the past months balanced against the glimpses of a new future that had begun to emerge. "I think we've already started building something real," she said finally. "These past weeks, finding our way back to music together, to honest conversation, it feels more authentic than the last 2 years of our marriage." "It does," he agreed. "But is it enough? Can you ever fully trust me again?" "Trust isn't binary, Julian. It's not something you either have completely or don't have at all. It's built day by day, truth by truth." She moved closer, allowing herself to touch his face, the first such intimate gesture she had initiated since discovering his deception. "I'm choosing to trust the man I see now, the one who finally put May's needs before his vendetta, who's learning to live without secrets. And if I falter? If old habits resurface? Then we work through it. Together. The way we should have from the beginning." He covered her hand with his, turning his face to press a kiss against her palm. "I don't deserve this second chance." "It's not about deserving," Nora said softly. "It's about choosing, every day, every moment, to build something true." From the apartment behind them came the soft sounds of May turning in her sleep, a child finally beginning to find her place in a world where all the fundamental truths had shifted. Tomorrow there would be more questions, more adjustments, more delicate negotiations of their emerging family structure. But for tonight, in this moment of pause between movements, there was simply the truth, complex, painful, but finally spoken aloud. "Play with me," Julian said suddenly. "Now, while she's sleeping. The Bach we've been practicing. It's nearly midnight. Music knows no hour," he quoted, a phrase she recognized from her own teachings. "Please, Nora. Let's speak the language that first brought us together." In the softly lit music room, they positioned themselves as they had countless times before, Julian with his violin, Nora at the piano. The Bach sonata in E major began tentatively, both finding their way through the familiar notes with new awareness. By the second movement, something shifted, a synchronicity, a harmony beyond the written score. Their eyes met over the music, a wordless communication flowing between them as naturally as breath. From the doorway came the soft sound of a third instrument joining. May's violin adding an improvised counterpoint to their duet, her small figure silhouetted against the hallway light. She had awakened and, drawn by the music, chosen to join their midnight concert without invitation or announcement. Julian faltered momentarily, then recovered, making space in the musical texture for his daughter's contribution. Nora adjusted her playing accordingly, the three instruments weaving together in an unrehearsed but somehow perfect musical conversation. When the final notes faded, May lowered her violin, regarding them both with solemn eyes. "My mother said music tells the truth even when people can't find the words," she said simply. "I think we sound like a family." With that profound observation, she returned to her room, leaving Nora and Julian in speechless wonder at the wisdom that transcended the child's years. Out of the mouths of babes, Nora whispered finally. "Or through their violins," Julian added, his voice rough with emotion. They stood together in the gentle silence that followed, the unplayed music still vibrating between them, a composition still being written, note by note, truth by truth, day by day. Not perfect, not flawless, but finally, authentically theirs. What would you have done in Nora's position? Could you forgive such profound deception for the sake of an innocent child? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that explore the complex nature of truth, forgiveness, and the families we build through both blood and choice.